You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Bella Perez Rubio, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode,
A democracy cannot survive for so long without the presence of an opposition of people who are independent and credible and courageous.
we check in on the opposition as Ferdinand Marcos Jr. enters the second year of his presidency. Marcos and his running mate for Vice President, Sara Duterte, won their elections by an overwhelming margin, delivering a blow to an already weakening opposition. Congress is filled with UNITEAM allies who legislate mostly according to the president's agenda, approving measures including one that establishes the controversial Maharlika Investment Fund.
It is a truism that legislation is a numbers game. Indeed, what the supermajority wants, the supermajority gets for the president.
That's Albay 1st District Representative EDSA Lagman. He's also president of the once ruling Liberal Party.
It must be also understood that the minority in the House of Representatives, more particularly the minority leader, has been handpicked by the House leadership. It has been co-opted. In other words, there is no more institutional minority in the House of Representatives since the 16th Congress up to the 19th Congress. So the minority in the House becomes an adjunct of the majority.
In fact, in the lower house, Lagman says,
I think I'm the only independent opposition, although I would like to underscore that the members of the Makabayan group, like Representatives Franz Castro, Arlen Brosas, and Manuel, in several instances have been vocal oppositionists, together with Liberal Party members Bordado and Mujib Ataman.
the Makabayan bloc has been a consistent opposing voice to past administrations, helping to balance out the lower house. One of its frontrunners, Bayan Muna Party List, failed to clinch a seat in the last election, despite winning 3 seats in 2019. And in the upper chamber,
we are a minority of 2 in the Senate.
that's Senator Aquilino Pimentel III, speaking on One News' The Chiefs.
That's what they call a real minority, di ba? How much smaller can you get from 2, di ba? So we really need help from the opposition outside of the Senate and outside of Congress. So I hope that they will be vocal or be felt during these succeeding years.
The other member of the Senate minority is, of course, Senator Risa Hontiveros. She was named the new leader of the opposition by former Vice President Leni Robredo in 2022.
I do not know if Senator Risa is organizing the so-called opposition, but I hope someone is doing it. I'm not consciously doing that because, as you all know, I have a problem with my own political party. So we still have an ongoing legal battle in the Supreme Court. So doon po muna ako nakatutok, to save my own political party.
So does this mean there isn't an organized opposition in the legislative bloc? That's what I asked Congressman Lagman.
Definitely, Senator Risa and myself have been coordinating. We have been meeting in order to strengthen our respective opposition stance, both in the House as well as in the Senate. This coordination is limited, most probably, to the two of us. I don't know whether there is any coordination by the Makabayan bloc with the Senate counterparts.
But there have been some small cracks in the united front presented by the ruling coalition, and it's led to speculation that a formidable opposition may splinter off from within the Marcos administration. In May, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, a key player in the Marcos-Duterte alliance, was demoted from a leadership role in the House. Shortly after, Vice President Sara took to Instagram to call someone a tambaloslos, a Visayan pejorative term. It's believed she was referring to House Speaker Martin Romualdez, but has refused to comment further on the post.
history would confirm that a supermajority cannot hold itself together for so long. Somehow there will be irritants and rivalries which could result to its disintegration. This has happened to the previous dominant political parties in Philippine politics. And that's part of our history, and it could be part of our future.
But whether such a group, if it even forms, will serve the function of a real opposition is even harder to predict.
The opposition has a number of roles, and these are challenging roles. One, it must be the constant critic of broad administration policies and the majority's importunate. Number two, it should be the serious guardian of constitutionalism. Next, it should be the soundboard of the people's dissent, dissolution, and discontent, because the people cannot go direct to the highest echelon of government. That is the role of the opposition, to bring their sentiments to the officials concerned. Also, the opposition should not be just opposition. It should be a consensus and consensus partner of the administration in policies and measures which are really pro-people and for the advantage of the common man. And then also, the opposition should be able to give alternative policies and measures which could be more relevant and better than administration policies.
We'll pause here. More on the opposition's plans on the midterm elections when we return. So how would you rate the president's performance so far ahead of his second SONA?
I usually do not want to rate officials. Considering that I am in the opposition, what I can say most probably would be self-serving. But what I can tell you now is he's much better than former President Rodrigo Duterte. I think he's more approachable and more sincere, and would be willing to listen. I hope that he will be able to resolve our problem with China with respect to the West Philippine Sea. A favorable decision obtained by the late President Pinoy Aquino, but forfeited by President Duterte in favor of China.
So far, Lagman says he believes the opposition has carried out its function as best as it can.
And we have been effective to a certain extent, despite our being very few. Let me cite some examples. One, both the opposition in the House as well as in the Senate opposed the repeated postponement of barangay and SK elections. The Supreme Court said that it is essential for a democracy to have regular intervals of elections in order to uphold the right of suffrage. And also, there is a constitutional ban in the transfer of funds, like what the proponents of the postponement said, that they would like the funds allocated for the SK and barangay elections transferred to the executive for purposes of economic recovery and the pandemic. And that was staunchly rejected by the Supreme Court. Also, the opposition, both in the House as well as the Senate, was against the calling for a constitutional convention and amending the provisions in the Constitution to allow foreigners up to 100% capitalization. Although the resolution was passed in the House, as well as the bill appropriating funds for the Constitutional Convention, it never was taken up in the Senate, and the President, no less, did not endorse this proposal. So again, the opposition prevailed.
A number of opposition lawmakers also staunchly resisted the passage of the Maharlika Investment Fund bill. It was signed into law by President Marcos on July 18.
But if the Maharlika Investment Fund fails, then the presidential economic advisors who solidly supported the same, their heads must roll.
But for the opposition to effectively carry out its functions, it needs more than just a handful of people in Congress.
And when it comes to election, the opposition must be able to put up credible candidates against the aspirants of the administration in local and national elections for the election of transient leaders.
So how do they plan to do that?
Well, the LP is broadening its base by encouraging membership from the grassroots and from the youth levels. And then we are ready to put up senatorial candidates as well as local candidates and hopefully be successful in their bids in comparison to the last two elections. And we are also opening the doors to coalition with political parties and personalities who share our ideology in good governance.
Former Vice President Robredo's team similarly banked on grassroots campaigns to carry them over the finish line. So I asked the Liberal Party chairman,
is there anything that the LP or a broader coalition is doing this time around to make sure that strategy will actually result in wins?
First of all, I think if we are determined to fight it out in 2025, then we should be able to tell the people soon enough who are our candidates. The earlier said, the better. Number two, we should be able to tap legitimate media to really publicize and propagate our political agenda and program of government. And number three, we should be able to parry or even destroy this false propaganda and lies of trolls and other mercenaries using social media.
And how is the opposition doing on those three metrics that you just mentioned?
We are doing just now all of this in order to have a measure of success in 2025.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. This episode was edited by Pedoy Blanco. Our executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior news editor is Veronica Uy. Follow Teka Teka News on your favorite podcast app or listen to us for free on YouTube. Thanks for listening.